Welcome to my channel. I'm Elizabeth Liz Muschett, and joining me today is John Foster, talking about the midpoints, our second show. Welcome, John. How are you doing?
Pretty good. Back from a very time, I don't know, how do you say it? You get so worn out when you go to Norwalk or one of those conventions, you have no energy for a week. So I'm in that week.
Yes, integrating all that new information or new ideas on some things that we have been working with, but it's like, oh, I haven't looked at it that way.
Yeah, and there were a couple good ones like that. So
Good. So, Discovering Midpoint Pictures Part II. And John is an astrologer, a software developer, teacher, lecturer, graduate of Noel Till's master degree certification, served on the Washington State Astrology Association board for what, 7 or 8 years, I think.
seven years, and the last two I was president of.
And his website is astroperegrine.com.
Correct.
And I'm Elizabeth Liz Muschett, an astrologer, author, intuitive, and numerologist. And my website is alightpath.com. And we always enjoy hearing from you. And I'm going to let John take it away.
Okay, so the first one that we did, we talked a lot about the structural basis of figuring out what the heck are these things called midpoints and what are these things called midpoint pictures. And what I've observed after teaching this for a number of years, it often takes people who are not been exposed to midpoints several different sessions before it finally clicks. That's what it is. So the first part of today's presentation, it's kind of an extended version of the first presentation that we did, but we go into different directions with it and a few more principles to show you how it all works out. This will be the last time I get into this level of the beginning stuff, because thereafter we're going to actually go into some real serious midpoint pictures that you don't want to forget. But I like to start it with a little review, and I like this quote because I remind myself, and I teach my students this all the time. Repetition is the mother of skill. This is something I heard from Tony Robbins, and it stuck with me 20, 30 years ago, and it's so daggone true, it's not funny. If you want to learn how to do something, you've got to be repetitive about it and do it over and over and over and over again.
I know for me, I've done it over and over, and it's like I'm still learning about the midpoints, and especially from you, because I've heard you talk about it for a while, and being on my show, this is really helping me. So I agree, and they can go back and watch the episodes as many times as they want. So that's fantastic. And those that are watching live, if you have a question, just type it in the comments and I'll ask John at some point.
Okay, so again, in review, if you hear me say planets or points or stellar body, what I'm talking about are the main planets, which is sun, moon. Obviously, they're not planets. I mean, one is a star, one's a satellite of the Earth. And then you have the planets Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. And we use those because that's where all of the behavioral faculties lie in terms of a natal chart disposition. Then we have our outreach into the world. And Noel used to say, nothing ever happens in life without the angles being involved. So we look at the ascendant and the MC, and we look at nodes because nodes also have to deal with contact. And we look at the Aries points because the Aries points, which refer to different parts of the season, as you know, they somehow externalize what's happening in us and people get to see it. Not exactly sure how that happens, but psychologically it does. And it's a very important point that you don't want to miss. So when you hear me say that, this is what I'm talking about. Okay, next slide, please.
And so the Aries point is 0 degrees, Aries,
Yes.
Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn. Just want to, for those that don't know, just to make sure they know.
Yes, correct. That's why I put them there. All right, so why should we use midpoints? First of all, you get a lot of information, obviously, from a natal chart. But what if you didn't have a natal chart and all you had was a midpoint list? Do you think you could do a natal consultation with it? I'm here to tell you that actually you could, because I could give you an exercise where all I give you is the listing from a chart, and I could ask you to go through it. Once you learn how to use midpoints and you learn how to hone in on the important ones, you will know how to build a scenario of who's coming to dinner just from the midpoint list. You will have an inkling of who this person is, what their interests are, what some of their challenges might be, that kind of thing. And that's just from the midpoint. Okay. But that's the reason it works, is because the chart's not just the information. This is just another slice, another view of the same thing that is already inside of that chart. Okay. So what it does is midpoints give us an additional lens into the dance between the planets. In a natal chart, you generally think of the dance as the aspects between. Okay. But sometimes there are no aspects. So it also discloses tendencies or talents that are not easily seen in a natal chart. They're also useful, as I just said, when a planet is unaspected. What if there does appear to be a planet that's not dancing with any of the other planets? What's happening? Is it truly just out there on the dance floor all by itself and just floating around pretending that it's dancing with somebody? They're also helpful when activated by transits, by solar arcs, or by other progressions. And in synastry, they reveal points of connection, support, and or challenge. Okay, so you get the full, and you're going to learn as I teach you further into this, that I just get a feel for what the measurement might indicate. I don't necessarily try to get down into all the nitty gritty. Okay, so hopefully I'll be able to relate that, and you'll say, yes, that makes it easier. Okay. So what is a midpoint? We talked about this the last time. It's simply a mathematical point that's halfway between two planets. The reality is that there always are two midpoints. But by convention, we use the closest zodiacal midpoint. So down there in that little diagram, you can see there's P1 and P2. Well, the closest one is on that little side of the line. So we would use that as our midpoint. Now, what's really cool is that there's a midpoint between every planetary pair. Just like there's a phasal aspect between every planetary pair. So by using midpoints, we get 78 additional points of potential contact. Okay, so that's a lot of potential information that we leave if we do not explore the midpoints that are in a chart. All right, now there's two ways really you can do this. You can either be a manual sort of person, or you can be a computerized sort of person and do what the most of us do. Now, if you want to manually calculate it, you can. So all you have to do is go and get a list of all the planets and then loop through those planets. And then for all the other planets, get one of those, take each of them, planet 1 and 2, convert it into its longitudinal decimal. So for example, if your sun were at 0 Leo, that would be 120 degrees. If your sun were at 0 Scorpio, that would be 210 degrees. If you add those two together and divide them by 2, you get a midpoint. Okay, it's that simple. Now, you could do that for all 78 of them. Wouldn't that be fun? Would you like to sit there and spend an evening calculating all these midpoints so that you can get a little bit more information? Or let's go for the easier way. Now, last lecture, I guess, we talked about that there's several ways to do midpoint listings. There are a couple techniques beyond what I'm showing you. I just don't have much experience with those, so I'm going and showing you the ones that I do have experience with. So the first one is this listing, where you basically take all of the planets and you put them in a 45-degree bucket. And the cardinal signs in green are from 0 through 15. And the fixed that are in yellow are from 16 through 30. And the mutable are from 31 through 45. Okay. And the reason I went for 45 this time instead of 90, like I started with the last time, is because there's two other potential contacts you get by going in the 45. In a 90, you only get conjunctions, squares, and oppositions. Those are called the eighth harmonic. In the the fourth harmonic. In the eighth harmonic, you get two more. You get a semi-square and you get a sesquiquadrate, plus the conjunction, plus the oppositions, plus the square. So you get 5 different points of contact that you can see here. Now you tighten up the orb a bit, okay? But for example, I put a little red rectangle around a couple of them, and you can see, for example, under the pink, and if you look at the very first rectangle, the ascendant is at 31 degrees and 30 minutes. Right above it, about 1 minute difference, is the moon Mercury. Okay, so that's a midpoint we would want to pay attention to because it's with an angle. And there's several more down there which you can go and look at. And in this case, both Uranus and the North Node, each of them have contact with the Mercury MC. Okay, so we actually have one midpoint, but it's making a relationship with two of the natal planets. One is the node and one is Uranus. So I hope you can see that, because you can look at 1 degree before in a 45 sort and 1 degree after. That's why there's the overlap of the rectangles. And you can look at this, study it when you go back and review this video, and I think it'll make perfect sense to you. But these are all close. All right, let's go and look at an easier way to see them. So in a list, you get this gigantic list of numbers, and a lot of people, even when you know what the orb is, you go to a planet, you go 1 degree forward, you go 1 degree past, it can still be a little bit challenging. So what we do is we take that report, and instead of putting all of the midpoints on there, we only put the midpoints that are within orb in their bucket. So here, this report, a midpoint tree, shows every planet all the way up through the Aries point. So we have the sun, moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Saturn, Jupiter, sorry, all the way through, and we end with the MC and the AP, the Aries point. Okay, so in this case, I have a little square around Venus, but you can see Venus has some midpoints under there. If you look at Jupiter, it has nothing in there. Doesn't mean Jupiter's not important. It could be very important in a natal chart. But in terms of dancing with some additional partners in the midpoints, not none. Same thing with Neptune. Okay, Neptune is often by itself as well. If you look at the Mars, look how many midpoints are in Mars. There's a lot of them. So if you were just looking at this midpoint tree and you were trying to figure out, I wonder which planet has the most midpoints and want to dance with it, you can see it numerically right there. And then you go down and look at that to see if there might be some very important contacts between the ascendant, the sun, the moon, the MC, and the Aries point. And by the way, speaking of the Aries point, most software doesn't include the Aries point in their midpoint trees or their sorts. We do. So there you can see we also have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 ways that there are some information that is trying to be seen by the public. Now, how it's going to work out is going to be different depending on the context and the life that's being lived, the professional exposure, and all of that. But the point is that if this were me, I would pay attention to Mars. I'd pay attention to Saturn and the Aries point for sure. There's some other ones in there I'd pay attention to. And I'd pay attention to the one with the green square, and you're going to see why in a minute. All right, so again, what is the midpoint? We said that already. A mathematical point halfway between 2 points. So in this case, what we're trying to do is show you one. So for example, we have the sun, moon, and if we took the sun and moon of this chart and we added them together and divided by 2, we would get 20 degrees Sagittarius and 54 minutes. Now, when we place that in a chart, like we have over here in this little chart fragment, you can see that it is within orb approximately 2 degrees or more from the node. Okay, so again, every midpoint exists between, or there is a midpoint that exists between every single planetary pair. Okay, I hope that makes sense.
It does.
All right, now what we're going to do is we're going to synthesize 2 more midpoints, and these are similar to what we did the last time, but there's a little bit of difference on them just to switch them up a little. So when you synthesize a midpoint picture, and again, a midpoint picture is when a planet is equal to or touches, it's within aspect, okay, or within orb, sorry, of the midpoint. So we saw on the previous one that the node equaled the sun, moon, because it was approximately, in this case, in a 90 degree sort, it was 2 degrees away. Okay, just between you and I. So it's a little bit further. Now, there's a reason why we wouldn't give a little bit of an extension of orb to the sun moon, because as you're going to learn in the next lesson, I believe that we do, you will learn that the sun moon midpoint is probably the most important midpoint picture or midpoint that any planet can tie into, and that any planet that ties into it will have life altering effects. So if you do not know that there is an important midpoint picture involving your sun moon, you are going to miss a key part of your analysis. And therefore, when you go to talk to your client, you have a piece of information that they would have readily connected to, but you didn't show it to them. You didn't reveal it because you didn't see it. Okay, so what we're trying to do is motivate you to see it. So in this case, we have a midpoint picture, sorry. So it's broken up into the focal point and the midpoint. And as you can see, what I try to do is I try to feel the midpoint. So the sun, moon. And if we look down below, we sort of have some keywords. This is the masculine and feminine. This is your sun and moon. This is your core need fulfillment. This is also, when you get older, the way that you make contacts and new relationships with other people. And there's a lot more to it. That's just a kind of a quick and way to it. And when you apply it to the node, that doubles the potential for the contacts and relationships. And when you're young, it means that your mother was very much involved in influencing. Now, all mothers influence, but some do it more than others. We see movies all the time where the person's going crazy with that. Oh my God, my mother's coming over. Okay. Those kinds of movies, probably that person in that movie has a contact with either their node or their sun moon midpoint. Okay. All right. So here's another one. So again, all you need to do is feel it. So focal point, we have Saturn. Saturn's a little heavy, right? We have the point of Mercury, Uranus. So right away, we're thinking communication. We're thinking, wow, this person could be really out there. They could kind of have a buzz with their communication. They could have some, as I have over here, some original thoughts that are getting structured by Saturn. Okay, now I don't know about you. How's it feel to take an original thought that nobody's and then try to fit it into the status quo? How would that feel?
Uncomfortable. You don't fit in.
Yeah, like that doesn't mesh, because status quo is trying to make us think like them. But Uranus, with Mercury Uranus, it wants to think like it wants to think. It doesn't want to be influenced necessarily by somebody coming over there and trying to put boundaries and walls around it and say, no, you cannot think that way. No, you can think that way. Okay. And if you can't, then you get stifled or frustrated individuals, or you get frustrated expression or communications. You can actually have this person that could say, screw that, I'm going to do it anyways, and risk getting into trouble. Or you can have somebody that even goes all the way the other way and becomes depressed because they don't get their voice out. Okay, so there's a wide stream of how this could work, but we would look at the natal chart in conjunction with looking at the midpoints to make sure we're staying on target. Okay, we're not going to read these things out of context. The natal chart is your context. You anticipate. Then you have a constant consultation with your client. Your client comes in and will tell you about their life and will show you how these things are working out. You don't even need to ask them. You don't need to say, oh, Mr. Client, how is your Saturn equaling Mercury, Venus, or Uranus working out? Because they will tell you, you know what? For some reason, nobody ever heard me. Okay, there it is. There is resonance that one's a hot one. And so will other themes start to click away when you're looking at the chart. Another possibility is it's the old ways meet the new. And it's, again, the interesting thing about old ways and new ways, usually in an open society, the new ways eventually break through the old. But the old does not want to give it up. Okay, so there's a lot of tension. The other thing is it could be stress-induced anxiety. Okay, anytime Uranus is touching something like Mercury, or Neptune with Mercury, or even Saturn with Mercury, Mercury gets stressed. And when it gets stressed, it's thinking about things all the time. When it's thinking about things that often leads to anxiety. So this could be one of the pictures from it. Okay, so you see how just this one little picture, you can go off on that and start to anticipate possible information. Okay, and what in the natal chart you saw that Saturn was conjunct Mercury. Okay, or maybe Saturn square Mercury, and maybe Saturn and Uranus are conjunct. Okay, so that would give you more echoes of the same thing that you're pulling out from here. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so so that's an example all the way up to this point. That's kind of a mild review of what we discussed previously with some new information presented so that it hopefully wasn't boring. Okay, but basically, no matter who you are, myself included, when Noel was teaching us, we like Noel. There's 78 midpoint pictures. Where do we start? How do we know what to focus on? How do we know to look at just the right ones, because there's too many? So Noel always taught us to work just on the essential of anything. Okay, keep it lean, keep it short, keep it small, keep it pithy. Same thing with midpoints. And so we keep it manageable by cycling just a few. So what do we look for? One of the first things, and this order is not necessarily the order. These are just some examples. So you can look for midpoints that are in contact with unaspected planets. Okay, we're gonna see that little Venus with its square again in a minute, I believe. And then we can look for midpoints that are in contact with the sun or moon, because if it's in contact with the sun or moon, you're talking again about part of your core being. So if there is a midpoint in contact with the sun, you want to know about it because it's contributing to your overall purpose. If it's in contact with your moon, it's contributing to your emotional security, okay, sense of routine self. If it's with the ascendant or MC, well, with the ascendant, that's how you're letting people know who you are, right? And the MC reflects back. It's also a kind of way of letting people know who you are, but at a different level, usually from a professional or vocational. Maybe you don't work, but you're part of a big family, and so the status comes in, or so on and so forth. And then, like we said, the Aries point. How are these particular midpoints getting out to the world? Okay, and the Aries point is one way that it does it. All right, and then we look at closest midpoint pictures. If you have a midpoint picture that is exact, or you have a midpoint picture that is within a few seconds, you just have to assume, just like with a close aspect, that that's probably registering somehow. Okay, you just make that assumption. Now, you don't know. You could talk to a person, you have this midpoint picture, and you looked at your chart and it suggests that they're an artist, and you're expecting them to tell you how they create like Rembrandt and all, and they come and tell you, no, I gave that up when I was a kid. It doesn't necessarily mean, but they gave up something that was very important to them. I've seen this a number of times, okay? And you talk to them and say, well, is there any possibility you might go back to that? Because your chart shows that you have this tremendous ability to be creative. Maybe they have 5 quintiles. Okay, if you have 5 quintiles, you cannot help but be creative. You just assume that. And when you don't see that, something happened when they were younger that stifled that particular talent from coming out. So any midpoint picture that jumps out at you, okay, and this is based on the theory of listen to your instrument. When you're a trained astrologer, you will over time develop an intuitive feel when you're looking at a chart, because you look at the chart the same way over and over and over and over and over again, because repetition is the mother of skill. Okay, and you look at it the same way, you soon develop a ability to see patterns, and some of those patterns jump out at you. You might look on your aspect grid and see that these 2 planets are not in aspect, but you look at the chart and the first thing that got your attention was 2 planets that were not in aspect. Now, if that were me, they're in aspect, as an example. And it's the same thing with midpoints. If you see a midpoint after you learn what they're about and it jumps out at you, trust it. Trust your instincts, trust your instrument. Okay, usually they reinforce the natal patterns, or sometimes they diverge from it. You're expecting this, and all of a sudden it's going over here, and you're going like, what the heck? How do I deal with expecting this, but it's actually might even be here? Okay, so you get the guy who went, what was Robert's Crossroads? I approached the road and had two forks, and I chose to do this one. Okay, it's that kind of an idea. Okay, next. Okay, so in the next few slides, we're going to use this private case. We'll explain what that little oval is in a minute. But this is the case we're going to use. And we kept it sparse. You'll see that there's not a whole lot of aspects here because we didn't include the minor aspects. We only included, the Ptolemaic aspects. If you don't remember what Ptolemaic aspects are, they are conjunction, sextile, square, trine, and opposition. Just those 5. Okay. Now let's go to the next chart. Screen. Okay, so here I'm kind of already explaining them. So we just said back there, how do we find them? Well, the first one I had was, are there any, I said, look for unaspected planets and then see if the unaspected planets are in the midpoint list or tree. Okay, so how do we find unaspected planets? Well, since we only use Ptolemaic aspects, that means if I look at this aspect grid over here and I follow them down, the only planet there that doesn't have any Ptolemaic aspects between the sun and all the way through Pluto, it can have an aspect with the node, it can have an aspect with the ascendant or MC, just with the essential behavioral faculty planets, sun through Pluto. Okay, and we see here there are none. So what we do is we write a little green line. That's what I do. I use green. And I circle with an oval on the chart so that if I'm looking at the aspect grid, I immediately know that Venus is unaspected. Somehow it's running away with the chart. It's dancing by itself. It's going off in its own direction. Okay. But I want to know, is there any possibility that there's some other way that it might be able to integrate in the chart? Okay. So for today, we're going to go and take a look at this Venus. And on the next slide, we see that same grid I showed you earlier, or midpoint tree, and you see the green rectangle around it. Okay, so in this case, we can see that Venus is equaling Moon Mercury. Okay, now that's something. Moon Mercury, when they're together, we're talking about how one feels and the emotions, and we're talking about how one thinks. So now you add Venus into the mix, and maybe you're thinking beautiful thoughts, or maybe you're relating in a beautiful way, or maybe it's easy for you to relay your heart to another person, or maybe it's easy for you to talk to them. You see, this is a midpoint picture here. We have Uranus, Neptune. Yeah, see, right away you got Uranus, Neptune, an outer planet. So immediately you can think there might be something a little weird about this, because in this case, we have Uranus equal with Venus, and we have Neptune. With Neptune with Venus, we always know that there's some romantic longing that's going on, okay? Maybe even a fantasy life about it, okay? This is the idea of when you're younger, when I was younger, for example, and I have a connection like this, by the way. When I was younger, I used to go out into the woods and with my friends or myself, and I had this fantasy that a woman on a white horse was going to come and rescue me. Okay, that's an example. Or it could lead into other kinds of, sexual issues or whatever, especially with Uranus there. Uranus is a little different about the way it sees things, isn't it? So, there's a possibility that it would be interested in a different kind of relationship. Okay, maybe something that is outside. Maybe this could be something taboo even. Okay. We see Uranus and the ascendant with it. So the same thing. Not only that, but this relationship would somehow make its way out in expectation of what the world, so maybe how the world expects you to act in this relationship is affecting you. Okay, because the ascendant is, we call it the facade. Why do we call it the facade? What do you think?
Because that's what we present to the world, and so you can wear a mask if you want.
Exactly, because by and large, we sit there in our minds and we say, I'm going to meet my boss. What do I think my boss wants me to act like? I know I'm going to act like that. As soon as one acts like that, thinks that way, that's a facade. What about a relationship? How many relationships are couples somebody else when they're introduced in the beginning, and only later over time reveal who they really are. And therefore, the relationship gets stressed out. That's because they were wearing a facade. Okay. All right. And same thing with Neptune ascendant, except for that be a bit more confusing, but it sort of echoes everything that we were just talking about. And I think I delve into this a little bit more. But also what's interesting is if you look at this midpoint tree down there, you can see some of those other aspects I showed you earlier. Notice the Uranus Mercury MC in yellow.
Mm-hmm.
Way back to that first tree where I showed you the overlapping. And then look over here at the node. The node is equal to Mercury MC. Same midpoint showing up in two different buckets. Okay. And here is another example of what we have, an echo of the Venus. So Venus equals moon Mercury. The ascendant equals moon Mercury as well. So we get an echo. So the other thing you can look at, which I didn't put on there, is you can look at the same midpoint appearing over and over, or the same midpoint appearing as different parts of the midpoint picture over and over. For example, Pluto equals, I don't know, Sun Mars, and then Mars equals Sun Pluto. Okay, it's a lot of power potential we're talking about there. Okay, but you see it echo, you want to keep that into consideration when you're building the synthesis of who you're expecting to come to dinner. You want to know who this person is, okay, when they walk in that door. Okay, so as we see here, this is based on the 45. Each midpoint's deposited into a planetary bucket. Makes it easy to see. The only problem is that the list will allow you to see a midpoint that is outside of the orb. Whereas here, you are stuck to whatever the mathematical calculation is. So what I always do is if I only apply 1 degree, but I always go a little bit outside of 1 degree, just in case I pick up that last one that's like 1 second past 1 degree, especially if it's a biggie like the sun, moon, or something. Okay, does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Okay. Next screen, please. Okay, so here's the orb again. So I think I've already done this, but let's scoot forward. Okay, so here what I did was, so I told you a little bit about it and just grabbing some meanings that were coming to my mind. Well, here is the midpoints contacting Venus again, but in this case, I'm going to use Noel Till's descriptions verbatim from his book on solar arcs, or his book on synthesis and counseling, the big thick 1,000 pager that he wrote showing us how to do everything we need to do. So here we have, first of all, I sorted them by closest of the 4. So the closest one, of course, is the Venus equals moon Mercury. And so here you get the same thing that I said earlier. Lovely thoughts, the sense of beauty. Beauty coming in because beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and beauty often and has to do with Venus, and Venus has to do with aesthetics. Okay, and beauty because your mind is thinking about what it sees and is categorizing, classifying something as beautiful. Okay, it takes more than Venus. It takes the mind. You have to see it, and then you have to come up with your own way of cataloging in your mind. It could also be something as simple as art appreciation, because again, it's an aesthetic. Your moon and your Mercury are in cahoots together over here. So you're feeling really good about it. You're thinking really good. And you're really loving what you're seeing out there. So therefore, the art appreciation eye. Lovely thoughts, art appreciation. Okay. And here's what I was talking about. When you get Venus, which is in contact with Uranus and Neptune through a midpoint, you're talking a very highly sensitive point. You're talking potential fantasy life. You're talking someone who can revel in love, even someone who can go head high into a swoon over something. It can be highly charged in a romantic way. It could be highly deceptive in another. Okay. Oftentimes you see these things come along and the person's in a swoon, and then 3 weeks later you go, hey, where's that? Oh, it didn't work out. Bum, man. I think I saw the wrong thing. Okay. All right. It was a little deceptive. In the next one, we have Venus now equaling Uranus ascendant. So like I said, Uranus is a little bit quirky, wants to be different, wants to be itself. Ascendant wants to get this out to the world. You have Venus over there, so you get the idea of being Venus and showing the world you're Venus and a little different. So this is where you get the idea of being sexy, because Venus and Mars have a lot to do with sex. Okay. Showing oneself in I misspelled that, showing oneself in an exciting fashion, because, you know, you want to look different, you want to be iconoclastic. And here we have Venus, and Venus has to do with things beautiful and also has to do with clothes, jewelry, fashion. Okay. So emphasizing individual looks of any kind. That's the iconoclasm I was talking about. The person wants to be different, wants to be seen as different, and will work overtime to be different. Okay. Unless there's another aspect somewhere where it's coming in and suppressing that. And if it's suppressing that, then you're going to want to know about that when you have your consultation, because what else is getting suppressed? All right. Venus equals Neptune ascendant. So this is similar but different, because Neptune has to do with sensuality, longing to understand, the compassion towards love, the compassion toward another person, the needing to merge, you know, and of course the potential confusion of all of that. The maybe I misunderstood. How many times does a person feel like that was the love of their life and they wanted to do everything, then are ready to change their life, and then the person tells them, I don't see you that way. Okay. Well, that's an example of where it could go on the other side. So this was an example of some of the thoughts that are directly from Noel. And I've used them now for 17, 20, 21 years. And it never fails to amaze me that if I use them verbatim on an important one, the client seems to have recognition. So it's like, how the heck did Noel get them so that way? But so highly recommend it. Okay, next. So we said any contact with the sun, moon. So in this chart, we have the node is conjunct Venus. So we have node equals sun, moon. Okay, and you can see it over there. The node is at 1723 and the sun moon midpoint is at 2054. So it's a little bit out there. It's a little bit wider than I would normally do at 3. But for some reason, when I saw this, I felt it pulled in. And then because it was pulled in, then it also brings Venus along, because Venus is 1 degree from a conjunction with it. So doesn't it make sense that if I'm already dancing with Venus and now I'm going to be dancing with the sun moon, that Venus is going to come along for the ride or for the dance?
Yes.
So what we do is, instead of having just the node equals the sun moon, now we have Venus equals the node equals the sun moon. So now we have 2 points on there that we can use in order to gather information about who we're going to have this consult with. Okay, so that's any point with a sun moon contact, absolutely look at it. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, then we look at the closest midpoint, and this is kind of redundant in a way because we've talked about these, but here are the midpoint descriptions taking verbatim from Noel Till. So we see ascendant equals moon Mercury. So therefore, within 1 minute, okay? 1 minute away. It's almost exact. So this person's emotions and the way they think about things are merging and need to be expressed out through the ascendant. People need to know. So what does it say? Letting people know how one thinks, sharing opinions. But I also would say letting people know how one feels. Okay. And maybe not afraid to let them know, because it's often dangerous to let people know how you feel or think, especially nowadays. We have Uranus equaling this is the overlap we talked about. So we have Uranus equaling Mercury MC, which is 3 minutes away. And we have the node equaling Mercury MC, which is also 3 minutes away. Okay, so these are very close. In reality, what do we have here? In reality, we have Uranus equals the node equals Mercury MC. So we have another more sophisticated. And sometimes you will get these trees that will go out 4 or 5 or 6 planets, okay, in some of these things. And then if you don't pay attention to that stream or tree branch or branches, then you're going to miss a lot. So in this case, remember, we have Mercury on the MC here, not on the MC, but equal MC in the midpoint. Okay. So Mercury has to do with communication. MC has to do with how you want to perform on your job, how you see yourself integrating in the world, how you want the world to see you. Okay. And we have this with Uranus adding its own little twist to it. So what do we get? Formulating new objectives, making a sensation, because now you are putting out your own unique spin out in your job or out in the world. And maybe you don't care how the world thinks about it. You're going to let them know. Okay. So this is given to a very unique voice, maybe. Okay. And maybe the world's not ready to hear it. We don't know. Okay. Throwing caution to the wind. That should be wind, because of great confidence. Okay. And you can kind of see that if you have Mercury with the MC and you have Uranus coming along and giving it a buzz, bzz, 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 okay. It's going to charge it up. It's going to amp it up. It's going to, yes, it could be anxiety as well, because again, anytime Mercury and Uranus are in contact, there's that potential because the nervous system is involved and it's highly charged. Okay. But this is also the kind of person, like I said, who says, I'm going to tell you what I think no matter what. This is throwing caution to the wind. Now, the only thing it could be great confidence, or it could be the person has a hell of an inferior complex and it just doesn't give a crap. Okay. So it's not keeping anyone into consideration. Where would we know that? Back looking at the natal chart. Maybe there's a Saturn retrograde. Maybe the father wasn't there for them. Or in nowadays, we would say the masculine principle. Okay. And I don't know why I have never there. I'm sure there was more than never. It probably had something else to it. All right. Now we have the node equals Mercury MC. Again, 3 minutes. So here we get the same idea of Mercury and MC voice, but now we're open because the node's all about making connections with other people. Okay. Oftentimes in a transit, if you see a transit to your node, it's a good time to have a meeting. Let's say you're looking for a job. Look for the times when the planets come along and hit the node. Good time for you to go out there and look for a job, because it's a good time to have an open interaction with others. Okay. It's also telling the truth. Now, the question I would have there is, whose truth? And obviously it's this person's truth. And ultimately that's all that matters, right? It's our truth. And in our day and age, we get a chance to tell it depending. Okay. So, so I'm hoping you're able to, just by looking at these 3 scenarios, the, excuse me, unaspected planet, anything that touches the sun, moon, Mercury, Venus, or the sun, moon planet in particular, or any of those I talked to, or the closest midpoint, if we just stop there and we did no further exploration of the midpoint tree or list, we would get a lot of information, don't you think?
Yes, there's a lot of information to use.
Okay. And so if you use these, it's going to enrich your understanding, not only of your client, but this is also about you understanding yourself. You may often ask yourself, looking at a chart, I don't get it. I don't see why I act this way. Well, maybe the answer might be provided if you look at your midpoints. And maybe you see an important planet making contact with one of them. Okay. All right. Okay. So I thought I would end today's with, I recommended 3 different books last time. I'm going to recommend 3 different books again, although I changed one of them. The one I changed was Eberton's, because Eberton's was written back during the World War II, the dark and gloomy days. And his stuff tends to be a bit pessimistic. And I don't know if people are pessimistic nowadays. I guess it depends on which side of things you're on, or optimistic. But I'm an optimistic person. I like to look at things and believe that I have some degree of control over things. So in these 3 different books, what I want you to understand is this: don't expect different authors to suggest the same descriptions. Okay, because this came through 3 different minds who were trained by many different people. So how they absorb that information. There's likely some resonance though. Okay, there must be resonance because my goodness, we're talking about the same planets over and over and over again. But there are just too many possibilities of how those planets can express themselves in aspects, in midpoints, in whatever. So the important point about this is that in order for these different books to help you, you need to keep them in the context of the person's life as they reveal it, or what I'm saying here, provided in a dialogue. You need to have a dialogue with your customer. You do not want to go in there with your client and say, okay, I have this book of your midpoints. Okay, so midpoint number 1, you are blah, 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 blah. Okay. And already the client's looking at you going, no, I'm not that way. Number 2, next most important, your mother was blah, 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 blah. No, you don't look at it that way. You suggest what the midpoint might add to the coloring that you've seen from the natal chart. And then you ask questions during the analysis, but never in the chart says you are like this, because you are not your chart. Okay. The chart's just a piece of paper. That's it. Okay. Period. I don't care if it's a historical one, traditional one, psychological one, humanistic one, evolutionary one. You are not that piece of paper. That piece of paper is nothing but a guide. Okay. And it's a guide, your instrument, your trained astrology instrument, so that you can take what you learn and what you know about people and about the world, put that all together, and then have a very good dialogue with your client. All right, let's go through 3 examples of 3 different books. All right, so I decided what I would do here is I would take the midpoints of Mercury, Venus, and Venus, Mars. And these are Noel Till's descriptions from his book to give you an idea again about the coloring. Now, we've already saw one of these, but this one adds another word, idealization. Okay, in addition to thoughts of love, we have idealization. Well, and that comes from the idea that anytime Mercury and Venus are in close contact with the sun or with Jupiter or with Neptune, there is the potential of idealization taking over. Now, why is it important that we know about idealization? Because idealization is a defense mechanism that we developed because something happened back here in our early years. So if we see a signature like this, then immediately we know we need to be asking about something. So we might look at the chart to see when it was activated. Okay, so that's one example. Venus, Mars, feelings for love. Okay, Venus, feelings, Mars, passion. We have romance. We have sexual relationship. We are often people, every time you go see an astrologer, especially astrologers, tell me about my Venus and Mars. Am I going to find my perfect partner? Are we going to have great sex? I don't know. Okay. We have to see the chart. Now, might there be a time when this Venus Mars gets stimulated and it's the right time to start looking? Sure, maybe so. All right. So the other thing we have is creativity in the arts, because you're taking all of your energy and you're applying it to aesthetics. So if you do that, do you think you might be creative?
Absolutely.
Now, obviously, if you're starting out in something, other people may not feel that way. You may not feel that way. You may be like, oh my God, this is horrible. But if you do the same thing over time, you put in the hours, eventually you'll get really good at it, right? So that's what we're talking about here in creativity in the arts. All right, next book. This is the second book I recommend, which is Don McBroom's book on midpoints. And in his descriptions, we have the same 2 midpoints. So here we have Mercury, Venus, and what he says is beautiful, harmonious, balanced communication, thoughts and ideas, and having a way with words. That's nice. Having a way with words. It's a good way of putting Mercury, Venus, because it means it. You can see Venus is shining its grace on your tongue. Okay, so good words. Okay, it's making you can even see if you have a little Neptune with this could be flattery for the wrong purpose. Okay, because you could be using these sweet words in order to con somebody. Okay, as an example. And in Venus Mars, he says, using energy for an aesthetic or social purpose. Makes sense? Socially active, because it's Venus. Venus is always wants to make contact with other people. That's what it's there for. Social activism. Let me get my mouse. Okay. Male and female awareness, sexual energy, and intimate relationships. So this is all the sexual stuff just wrapped up in a bunch of different phrases. Okay. But these are some things. So the point about it is not that you need to memorize these things, by the way. The point is you read it and you get a feel. Okay, I understand now that this Venus Mars might be important, because when I come over here on my chart, okay, so in this case, we don't see any connections, okay, because the closest thing is Mercury, but Mercury is over 2 degrees away. Okay, so this is a 45-degree sword. Anything that's beyond 1 degree, you're not going to look at. So in this particular chart, if this were the chart we were looking at, this person doesn't have anything hitting the Venus Mars. Okay. However, we saw already that he does, or yes, I think it's a he. It does have something hitting the Mercury Venus, because it's about 50 minutes apart. Okay. And then we have the Mercury Venus, Moon equals it. We have even the MC is equal it as well, as we saw, because it is a degree further out, a little bit less than a degree. Okay, can you see that? So here's the moon. The moon's at 1550. Mercury Venus is at 1640. So that's 50 minutes difference. So it's before. So it is minus 50. Okay. The MC is at 1732. Mercury Venus is at 1640. So if I add 52 minutes to this, give or take, I think that's right, then I can see that the MC is 52 minutes ahead of this Mercury Venus in terms of this grid. Okay, so both of them, the moon equals the MC equals Mercury Venus. Okay, now there's some other measurements there. Oh, by the way, you never use a midpoint and a planet if, so for example, if this moon, you can't say the moon is equal to the moon MC, because the midpoint equals the planet. It's included in it. So you never use a midpoint that has the planet within one of its sides. Okay. I don't think I mentioned that previously. All right. So that was Don McBroom's. Feels good too. Now, here's another one of the popular ones. Michael Munchausen wrote another book. And Michael, I don't know if he's Virgo. I have a suspicion he might be, because he literally wrote tons and tons of stuff on each of these midpoint possibilities. Okay. So you're going to get a lot more than just a feel. What I took out were basically the first partial paragraphs, just to give a feel for it. So in his case, Michael says Mercury Venus. So he tried to take them and put them into actual talents, capabilities. So he said versatility and shrewdness combined with charm and allure to bring you an appreciation of clever ideas. But we don't know if the person is versatile, because only certain types of planetary aspects have that versatility. Some of them don't. I don't think I'm very versatile, because I have Saturn all over the place. Okay. So I tend to think in pithy, structured, short, little ways. I can be shrewd and all that, but where do we get charm? Do we get charm just because Venus? Probably. Allure because of Venus. So we're bringing in different words about the characteristics of Mercury and Venus and putting them together and coming up with a sentence about them. Methods of verbal or written expression. Okay. Kind of makes sense. Okay. But the main point we see here is that it's an appreciation of clever ideas or clever expression. Really. That summarizes all of these words. Okay, so this is what I mean. You don't need to, you can read these because you'll get a lot out of it, but you need to learn how to summarize them and just get a feel for what the guy's talking about or person is talking about, because it could be a woman. And there's a couple other midpoint books that I am exploring right now that I might be able to offer in the future once I have finish them. Okay, Venus, Mars. Tenderness, Venus, encounters impulsiveness, Mars. Rage, Mars, feeds on irritation, Venus. Vanity meets force, Venus, Mars. Jealousy finds stimulation. Okay, now which one is the jealous one? Probably Venus, because Venus has the values. But you know, we often look at it and think it's Mars. So let's say it's any of those. Venus charms the Martian aggressiveness. Mars needs action, stimulating Venus to move. Okay? All right. So again, take that and you can summarize that all into Mars is stimulating or stirring up Venus. Okay, that's all you need, because you already know in your brain you have a lot of words that describe Mars and you have a lot of words that describe Venus. And when you go back to the natal chart, you will see Venus in a house and Mars in a house. So you got more words. Then you're going to see that Venus and Mars rule certain houses. So you're going to get more words. Then you're going to see that they are in different aspects and you're going to get more words. Okay, we don't need words. We need feels and putting it all together and coming up with an anticipation of what this suggests overall in the chart. So again, you can have a good conversation with your client. Does that make sense?
Yes, it's excellent.
Okay, any questions?
No, there's no questions. This was
Okay,
beautiful.
I think we were pretty thorough on it, but all right. So we're gonna move away from this sort of structural scaffolding that we did, building stuff around, and we're going to get into the next lecture. I think I'm just going to go over planetary principles. So we're going to look at, if the sun is in a midpoint, what does it mean? If moon is in a midpoint, what does it mean? If it's in this particular midpoint on it, what does it mean? So we'll go through a bit of that. And then after that's done, then we're going to actually get into the 4 midpoints you should never ignore. And then we're going to look at the special midpoints in another one, which are on top of the 4 that we're going to say you should never ignore. Okay? And there may be a few other things. I have some things on my mind. But so basically, class 3, planetary principles. You do not want to miss this, because if you miss this, you're going to miss a lot. And we've already kind of shared some of that today, but we're going to expound on it even more and kind of focus our lens just on that. And same thing, the following class, 4 midpoints. If you get those 4 midpoints, you will not be the same astrologer. Okay? You will forever change your ways. Same thing with the special midpoints. So next slide, please. These are the 3 books. So we have the Synthesizing, Counseling, and Astrology by Noel Till. Very hard to find. Sadly, I don't know why they're not printing it. I wish somebody would buy it up and reprint. So please look at your half-price bookstores in order to see if you can find it. Don McBroom's book on midpoints, the center one, is still available, I believe, on Amazon, and is, in my opinion, in many ways, one of the best midpoint books that are out there. So I highly recommend that one. And then if you want to go into the one, Unleashing the Power of the Planets with midpoints with Michael Munn-Casey, this is also a good one to have, but it's going to be one that you really need to study in order to gain out of it, because there's so much stuff. I was going to scan a couple pages just to show you one little teeny part which was 2 pages long. And then he finally starts to get into the connections with the midpoints and there. So, I mean, Don's going to give you, after you learn about it, and he goes through all these cool charts. Oh, and by the way, when we're going through this in the future, we're going to have charts to show you. Okay. So this time I just wanted to focus in on one chart just to get you orientated to what you need to look at. The next time, I'm going to assume that you know all of that, know how to do that, know how to find the midpoints, and I'm going to show you the midpoint grids or the chart so we can just take a quick look. And I think your mind's going to be blown on some of this. So you're going to be learning more about how the planets differentiate themselves in midpoints. And we need to go back to that slide. One more slide, I think. Keep going. Oh, yeah, I think you're going backwards.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Okay. So if you want to subscribe to our news, so I'm the author of Astrologer and Software. It runs on Mac or Windows. Um, and I not only do the software, I also teach one-on-one lessons. If you want to learn humanistic astrology from a Noel Till standpoint, if you want to book a demo to learn how the software works, you can go to Astro Peregrine, and you can send me an email. So you can either buy it and then I'll give you a demo, or you can go to our booking page and set up a demo there. But there's a limitation on the number of bookings that show up. So if you need to be more flexible, just send me an email at info@astroperegrine.com. And because Liz is holding these and supporting them, I am offering a discount of 12% on core, 20% off on the combo. The combo includes the core plus the astrocartography module. So you can save some money. You can get some really easy to use software. If you do a demo with me, you'll find out. And this is a way of saying thank you to Liz, who's been a good supporter for many, 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 many years. Okay, so that's it. That's all I have to say.
Well, thank you, John. It was very informative. I'm learning, and I thank you for coming and doing this with me. And I look forward to our future shows. And I want to thank the audience that's been here live and the people that come back and watch at a future date. Thanks for supporting my channel. I appreciate it. And I have other shows. There's lots of other shows that I do, so a good variety. So stop in anytime, subscribe. I'm also a consulting astrologer. And I'm going to say goodbye and thank you, everybody, and we'll see you next time.